The morning sun had barely risen over the small town of Elmsworth when Margaret Dawson, an 82-year-old widow with silver hair and time-worn eyes, stepped into the marble foyer of First Alliance Bank. She wore her best Sunday dress, navy blue with white polka dots, and carried an old leather handbag that had softened with age. Her gait was slow but dignified, a soft tap of her cane echoing with each step she took. It was the kind of morning when birds sang in chorus and the world felt gently hopeful, yet Margaret's heart was heavy with uncertainty. She had come to claim what was rightfully hers, a modest bank account she'd maintained with her late husband for over 5 decades. After his passing, she had tried several times to access their joint savings to cover her rising medical costs and basic living expenses. But each visit had ended in frustration, with young clerks citing a lack of updated documentation and the bank's new policies. Today, she carried the original ownership documents, notarized by a lawyer who had known her and her husband since the days of rotary phones and handwritten ledgers. The line was long, but Margaret waited patiently, her back straight and eyes fixed ahead. When she finally reached the teller, a young woman with a tight bun and a tired smile glanced at the papers and shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Dawson," she said, her voice clipped. "These documents are outdated. Without digital verification or a notarized will stating you as the sole beneficiary, we can't grant you access." Margaret's eyes clouded. "But my name is right there. That's our joint account. Harold and I opened it in 1968. Please, I need to pay for my medication." "I understand, but I can't override the system. You'll have to come back with legal proof." Margaret stood still for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. Around her, the clinks of coin trays and muffled conversations blurred into a haze. She had never felt more invisible. As she turned to leave, a soft voice interrupted. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you Margaret Dawson?" A suited man in his late 30s, with wire-framed glasses and kind eyes, stepped forward. Behind him stood 2 security guards and the bank's branch manager, all suddenly alert. "Yes, I am," she replied, confused. He smiled gently. "I'm so sorry for the inconvenience. Could you please come with me to the private office?" Margaret hesitated, but followed him. Inside the glass-walled room, tea was brought to her. The branch manager apologized profusely, offering vague words about miscommunication and bureaucratic error. Margaret nodded politely, still unsure of what had changed. Then the man in glasses leaned forward. "Mrs. Dawson, you raised a remarkable son." She blinked. "I beg your pardon." Just then, the door swung open. A tall man in a charcoal suit stepped in, his presence commanding the room. Sharp jawline, salt and pepper hair, and eyes that matched her own. It took Margaret a moment. Decades had passed since she had seen him in anything but casual jeans and a baseball cap. "Christopher." He knelt beside her, took her hand, and smiled with a warmth only a mother would recognize. "I heard what happened, Mom. I'm so sorry. I had no idea." Christopher Dawson. Billionaire tech mogul. CEO of a multinational software company. Featured on Forbes, Time, and practically every major financial magazine. But to Margaret, he was still her boy, the kid who scraped his knees on the driveway and brought her dandelions every spring. The staff was silent, watching with widened eyes. Christopher turned to the branch manager. "This woman built everything I am today. She supported me when we had nothing, when she skipped meals so I could go to school with a full stomach. If this bank can't honor her, then we'll take our business elsewhere. And by business, I mean the corporate accounts of Dawson Technologies." The manager turned pale. "Mr. Dawson, I assure you this was never our intention. We deeply apologize." Margaret sat quietly, stunned. All she'd wanted was access to her meager savings. She never asked for fame or leverage, only fairness. But in that moment, something more profound happened. It wasn't just about a son coming to his mother's aid. It was about recognition, about seeing the invisible and valuing the unseen. Christopher didn't stop there. He turned to his assistant. I want a new fund established in my mother's name. A trust for elderly citizens who face bureaucratic barriers like this. We'll start with 50 million. And we'll partner with local banks to ensure this never happens again. Margaret gasped. Chris, that's too much. He shook his head. Not for what you've given me. News of the event spread like wildfire. Social media lit up with the story of Margaret Dawson. The elderly woman denied her own money until her son, the billionaire, stood up for her. But as the headlines swirled, Margaret returned to her quiet home, where the garden still bloomed with the roses Harold once planted. Weeks passed, and the fund began helping thousands of elderly citizens reclaim their dignity. Margaret received letters from strangers thanking her, crying with her, and sharing their own stories of being overlooked. One letter read, "Because of you, I got my pension back. You reminded me that we're not forgotten. Thank you for raising a man who remembered where he came from." Margaret read it with misty eyes, her heart full. She didn't need millions. She didn't crave attention. But knowing that her quiet life had sparked a movement, that she had reminded the world of the power of compassion, meant everything. And so, under the same sun that rose the day she entered the bank, Margaret sat in her porch chair, a soft smile on her face, the air filled with the scent of lilacs and something sweeter still, hope. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary changes begin with a simple act of recognition, and the courage to say, she matters. Here's the full story you requested, emotional, inspiring, and centered around kindness, dignity, and the unseen power of a mother's legacy. Let me know if you'd like help adapting this into an audiobook script or breaking it into parts for social media.